All right, we better get to this story. We're never going to get out of here. All right. Go ahead and keep your finger in Esther chapter 4 or whatever's on there. Well, we're going to get there. It's going to take us about 12 years to get there, okay? In the 3rd year of the reign of the Emperor Ahasuerus, and something that struck me, I made sure I reread this so I would get all of the details correct. I had never noticed the timeline of this. A whole bunch of stuff happens in the 3rd and 4th year of the reign of King Ahasuerus, and then the whole story jumps to the 12th year of the reign of King Ahasuerus. And if you want to understand everything that happens in the 12th year, you've got to remember all this stuff that happened back in the 4th year. So, and I think it's great that God, during the intervening years, did not forget, because several of the events that happened earlier on, they rescue the main characters later on. And God had His hand behind all of it. And I think this is probably a good time to mention that the book of Esther has one very, very odd thing about it that doesn't occur with any other book of the Bible. Does anybody know what it is? It doesn't mention God. The Hebrew word Elohim, or the Hebrew name of God, Yahweh, not found anywhere in the original text. They never stop and say, let's thank God for this is what happened, or maybe God will rescue us. But throughout the entire book, you can see God's hand behind everything. And of course, in the famous passage that we're going to read, Mordecai tells his cousin Esther that, or niece, or whatever she was, that, who knows, maybe you were made queen of Persia. For the way we usually quote it is, for such a time as this, or for this very instance. And of course you hear in the background as you read that, there's kind of an echo of God put you there because He knew this time was coming, and now you have an opportunity to do something, affect the world for good, save God's people from utter destruction. And so just keep in mind, if you are someone who feels powerless, whether you're a man or a woman, keep in mind, God has you where He has you, and there is coming a time or a day or a situation where you will be called upon to do the right thing and save many lives. And so just keep that in mind. But our story begins in Susa, the ancient capital of the Persian Empire. What do we call Persia today? Anybody know? Iran. That's exactly right. And if you've immigrated from Iran to the United States and you don't want to be associated with the awful government that you fled, you will tell everyone that you are Persian. And so if you have a coworker or somebody that claims to be Persian, now you know. And they might be Christians, probably. I don't know. I used to have a coworker that was probably her background. I didn't get to know her very well, but she claimed to be Persian, by golly. And in the capital city of Susa, and you learn all kinds of world history in the Bible. The capital city of the Assyrian Empire was Nineveh, where Jonah was. And Daniel got carried off to the capital city of the Babylonian Empire, and that one's easy. That's just Babylon. And Susa is where the citadel is for the empire of Persia. And King Ahasuerus, in his 3rd year, decided he was going to have the rock and roll festival party to end all parties. And this is the thing. In the ancient world, you did not get drunk in front of your inferiors. And if you were the emperor, that means you did not get drunk in front of anybody. And so that is a good thing. But King Ahasuerus breaks all of those rules, and he has a big drunken festival with all of his courtiers, with everybody all of the nobles that attend him and help him run the nation. And it goes on forever. And they get drunk and high enough at one point. And this is always, ever since puberty hit me, I've always found this odd. They thought a party was not a party until you got the women to go have their own party down the hall. That never made sense to me at all, but for some reason that's what they thought. They thought they were all a drag or something. I don't know. But anyways, he and the men were at one end of the palace, and Queen Vashti was throwing the same big, drunken, nasty party for the women of the court and the women of the city of Susa and everything at the other end. And King Ahasuerus got a dumb idea, as you often do when you're drunk, and said, hey guys, the queen's actually really, really beautiful. I want to show you this. And so he summons her to be shown off in front of all the men at a drunken party. And naturally, ladies, what does she do? She refuses. This does not sound good or safe or anything. Well, this makes the king understandably upset at the time. And then as the festival winds to a close and everybody sobers up a bit, they remember that this happened. And the advisors to King Ahasuerus come to him and they say, now listen, king, we know you like your wife, but that you're also angry with her. But if the women of the empire hear that the queen herself does not have to listen to the almighty King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Emperor of all Persia, then they will no longer listen to their husbands. And we will have chaos and ruin throughout the empire. It will be an upheaval to society. Whether or not they were right, I'm going to let you and your spouse decide, okay? So, she needs to listen. You're the king. Everybody's supposed to do what you do, what you say, and your wife should be no exception. So the decision was made. Queen Vashti's out. She's back in the harem. She's not... I assume that means she was back into the harem, or maybe she was given her own place to live away from anybody. I don't know. But she is no longer queen. And then you have something that is not a shock to any pastor or anyone who has had to do any kind of family counseling. King Ahasuerus regrets this. Well, now I'm lonely and I don't have a queen. Well, you're the one that kicked her out. So the advisors come to him and they comfort him and they say, hey, let's gather all of the young women of marriageable age and there will be a contest. And the most beautiful one, the one that you, O king, like the most, you can keep as your queen. Now, I don't understand. Maybe they had to be chosen from noble families, and that's how they kept the bloodlines. I don't know. I don't know why just any old gal could suddenly become queen. This seems very odd to me, but the Bible doesn't go into any detail. So I would assume maybe they only came from noble families or something like that. But and I don't think it was voluntary. It's always been suggested that Mordecai thought this was a good opportunity for Esther, and so he was like, yeah, go try to be queen. Probably when these people that were collecting these young ladies knocked on the door, it was understood that, hey, even Vashti can't turn down the king, so we need your daughter, please. And off she went. It's probably good to point out at this point that King Ahasuerus and even Esther and Mordecai are not paragons of virtue necessarily in this story. Now, they come out smelling like roses. They come out being the people that, they do the right thing when times get tough and they follow God and everything. But they seem to kind of be a part of this pagan world in a way that might make some of us a little uncomfortable. But like I said, don't lose sight of the story. The point of the story is when it comes right down to it, they obey God and they do the right thing. And that is what we are supposed to get from this story. So Queen Esther, not Queen, totally not Queen Esther, uses her Persian name, and so does Mordecai, who is not her father, but her cousin or uncle who has taken her in. So he has raised this beautiful young girl as his own, and he is a court official. We don't know if he was at the drunken party or what, but he is some sort of court official. He's high up in the Persian government, and off goes Esther to this thing. Now, Esther does everything she is told. Okay, not in a bad way. And I think that's an excellent example. When she made friends with the eunuchs that were in charge of these girls from all over the empire who were there to become possibly queen. And so the eunuchs, the people in charge of the young ladies, they took a liking to her and they gave her the best makeup and they taught her the best way to present herself to the king and gave her every advantage. I think there's something to be said for a bunch of selfish, whiny, brat, beauty queen contestants that were brought from all the different pagan nations that the Persian Empire ruled over, and then there's the one Jewish girl, and maybe she's not perfect, but she's at least obedient and friendly and doesn't think about herself, thinks about others, and that's why everyone she comes in contact with likes her. Just a thought. Just a thought. Now, They give her all the advantages. They make sure she knows how to do her makeup. Whenever they said stand like this and walk like this, she paid extra attention. What you may not understand is it took a year. This whole process took a year, and at some point it was Esther's turn to be presented before the king. And I had heard this before. There was a movie that came out several years ago trying to portray, that's the word I'm looking for, portray all of this. And in advertising it, they said, you know, every one of these gals spent a night with the king, and that was the name of the movie, A Night with the King. And they weren't able to marry anyone else after that. And I thought, I don't know if that's true. And I didn't see the movie because I'm a guy. But, sorry. Truth hurts. But as I was rereading it, it's like, wow, that sounds exactly like what happened. Each of these girls had a turn for a year. There was one night out of that year where they were brought to the king and spent a night with the king. And if the king came back, she's so-so, well, she'd go back to the harem and probably live in the harem forever, but not be able to marry some other guy. She'd just be one more woman in the king's harem. But Esther, she impressed. Esther went. Probably wasn't her choice. Probably was forced to be in this whole terrible version of a beauty pageant. You wouldn't want to send your daughter, but you probably wouldn't have had a choice either. And she impressed, and she did everything just like all the people in charge of her told her to do. And she became queen of all Persia. Nice perks, right? About that same time that they have a feast in honor of the king choosing a new queen, Mordecai is attending this feast, and he had told her not to tell anyone she was Jewish. About the time that they're having this feast in honor of the new Queen Esther, as they're having this feast, Mordecai is in the right place at the right time to overhear a plot to murder the emperor. And he reports it. Now, the hand of God is behind all of this. Out of all those girls from all over the empire, Esther gets chosen as queen, and then Mordecai is in just the right place to hear of the plot by these two eunuchs of how they're going to assassinate the king and put someone else in charge. And he reports that there's an investigation, finds out he was right. Mordecai saves the emperor's life. And then nothing happens till year 12 of King Ahasuerus' reign. All of this went down, and then you get old, you get married, you get bored with each other, or whatever happened. And we come to a time later on. 12 minus 3 is 9, so, well, 1 year in the beauty contest, so 8 years later or something like that. 8 years later, there is an advisor to the king who rises in prominence, and his name is Haman the Agagite. Now, I've studied this, and everyone seems to agree. The fact that he is called an Agagite means that he is a descendant of King Agag of the Amalekites. Thank God I don't think I'm going to say that anymore. But way back around 1000 BC, we're probably in the story about 400 BC, so about 600 years before this, God, through the prophet Samuel, had told King Saul, I promised the Amalekites destruction way back when you guys came out of Egypt, and I never delivered on it. So you need to saddle up all of your guys. Well, they really didn't fight a lot on horses, but you need to grab your army, and you need to go slaughter all of the Amalekites, all of their livestock, all of their families. You need to just utterly destroy everything because I, God, commanded it. And so King Saul takes his army out there, destroys the Amalekites, but he breaks a number of rules. He keeps all the best livestock for himself, and he saves their king alive, King Agag. And King Agag is in prison there in the palace, and Samuel, the prophet of God, comes to visit King Saul, and he says, did you carry out the word of the Lord? King Saul goes, yes, I carried out the word of the Lord. And Samuel, the prophet, says, did you really carry out the word of the Lord? Did you kill everyone and their livestock? And King Saul says, yes, I killed everyone and their livestock, just like God told me to. I'm a faithful king. You said it. I did it. Aren't we a team? And prophet Samuel says, then why do I hear the lowing of cattle and the bleating of sheep Where did all the livestock come from? And Saul goes, oh, well, you see, and he lies, I brought back the best livestock to make sacrifices to the Lord. What about the fact that you preserved King Agag, and I told you to kill everyone? Well, Samuel utters a very famous line. It is better to obey than to sacrifice. We think the things that we give up for God or the animals that we sacrifice to God are a huge deal, but God really wants our obedience. In fact, Samuel goes to make sure the word of the Lord is fulfilled, goes into the dungeon. King Agag has just lived when everyone else died, so he's in a good mood, and he walks up to Samuel basically saying, isn't it a great day in the Lord? And Samuel says, not for you, buddy, and pulls out his sword and kills him right there. So, see, that's a boy story, right? That's a boy story. We don't, get past the beauty pageant already. But so anyways, Haman the Agagite, and the other title that the book of Esther gives him, Haman the Agagite, the enemy of Israel. So somehow, even though they killed everyone, including King Agag, probably a son or daughter of his was married to some other king or prince in some other land, and he has descendants, and they're out there somewhere. And so Haman is a descendant, probably even remembers that his family has a feud against the Israelites, against the descendants of Jacob and Saul and all them people. And so he rises in prominence, and King Ahasuerus commands that everybody needs to pay special honor to Haman and even bow before him. But whenever Haman walks past, there's Mordecai who won't bow to him. Amen. And when they say, now hold on, the king ordered this, why won't you bow before Mordecai like the king commanded? And Mordecai says, I'm a Jew. And that's the only reason the Bible gives. I won't bow down because I'm a Jew. Now we can infer from that we only bow down to God or only God and the king or something. But what the Bible specifically says is Mordecai says, I won't bow down to you because I'm a Jew. And Haman begins to study the Jews, and he hates the fact that Mordecai won't bow down to him and show him his due respect, and he won't do it because he's a Jew. Oh, there's more of you. And Haman decides he hates the Jews, and he comes up with a plan, and something I found was very interesting this time around was, as I was reading the story to make sure I tell it right, for a solid year, once a month, Haman the Agagite, the enemy of Israel, casts lots to see if it is an opportune time to strike Israel. Now, this is a religious practice. When you want to know what the gods are saying, even in the Torah, God commanded, when you want to know what my will is, if I don't send you a prophet to tell you this, then you can also cast lots, and my answer will be in the lot, kind of like rolling dice. For a year, every month, Haman consults his gods through the casting of lots. Is this the opportune month to strike Israel? And for 11 months, or for basically a year, he gets a no answer. But finally, in the final month of Adar, he rolls the dice, and however it worked, his pagan gods basically told him it was time to strike, and there was a certain day of the month of Adar that would be a good time to strike and do something. And so he goes to the king, and he says, King, I, as your top advisor, have a problem that I would like to present to you. There is a people living throughout your empire that they are troublemakers. They don't honor our gods. They don't honor our customs. And they're just troublemakers. They're called Jews. And we have cast the lots before our pagan gods in order to find the best day to tell everyone that they can slaughter Jews and take their stuff, that you can kill and plunder the Jews. And the king heard this plan, and he read over this law, and he said, that sounds like, if you say they're a problem, then they're a problem. That sounds excellent. And the king signed it into law. Now, Haman hated Mordecai so much, and he had his wife who gave him advice, and he had other advisors. And what they had decided to do was make the tallest gallows that had ever been made in order to hang. As soon as the law went through, they were going to hang Mordecai for, we're going to get an early start with this Jew right here. And they were going to hang Mordecai for everyone to see. That's why you make a tall gallows, is for everyone to see. So the gallows have been built. He gives the order, build the gallows, have it ready. Tomorrow we will hang Mordecai. And like I said, this is all happening very fast. We skipped 8 years, and then all of a sudden everything's happening very fast. That night, they're going to kill Mordecai in the morning. That night, the king cannot sleep. So he sends for someone, and they decide they're going to read him to sleep. And what they're going to do is, you know how we keep minutes of our business meetings? They have the guy read the minutes. No offense, Cheryl, but they have him read the chronicle of things that have happened at court. And they come to the spot where 8 years ago Mordecai had saved the king's life. God is at work here. And the king interrupts the guy reading the chronicle and says, no, hold on here. Does it mention in the chronicle that we ever did anything to thank Mordecai for what he did? And the chronicler looks it over and says, no, king, it just moves on to the other events. There isn't any record of us ever honoring Mordecai for saving your life and preserving the kingdom. So the king summons his top advisor, who is Haman. And he says to Haman, Haman, how should the king treat the man that the king wants to honor? Well, Haman is very excited because he's the king's top dog, so he assumes it must be him. So Haman gives the list of things that he would like to do. Well, O great king, King of kings and Lord of lords, this man should be dressed in the king's own robes, and he should be allowed to ride the king's own horse, and there should be a crier that goes before him and proclaims to everyone that this is how the king likes to honor the man in whom he delights. Haman, that is why you are my top advisor. You have such good ideas. Go and do all of those things to Mordecai. You thought the Bible was boring. But so the next day, instead of hanging Mordecai from the tallest gallows they could build, here's Haman as the crier in front of the horse that Mordecai is riding on, the royal steed dressed in the king's own robes, saying, behold, the man in whom the king delights. This is how we honor the man in whom the king delights. He goes home. Oh, the Bible includes the conversation. He goes home and he tells his wife and his other counselors what has happened, and they actually warn him, if you can't prevail against Mordecai, how are you going to prevail against the whole Jewish nation? Or something like that. You'll have to read it yourself and see what it actually says. But it was that day or thereabouts that the decree that the king had just signed goes out. And it is read by heralds in every city of the empire. On such and such a day of this month, you will be allowed to kill Jews and take their stuff. And one of the reasons they sold the king on it was because Haman said, I think we can get about 10,000 more for the palace treasury through this. You know, some of us will plunder and money will go into the treasury. And so we estimate 10,000 of whatever their monetary thing was. And so everyone gets ready to kill Jews and take their stuff. Plunder the Israelites. I'm lost. But of course, we know that God is not going to let this stand. There we go. God, well, getting all my names mixed up here. Mordecai hears of this law that has been signed into law. And whatever his position is, he's just been honored for the day, but he gets off that horse and discovers that, oh, by the way, all of your people have been singled out for extermination, mostly because of you. And, well, he knows someone in high places, and so he runs to Esther. But he doesn't just do that. He dresses in sackcloth and ashes, and he goes to the citadel, the palace. And no one is allowed onto the palace grounds in sackcloth and ashes and in mourning, and so he sits outside the gate. And Esther hears her crazy uncle is doing something weird outside the gate. Of course, she sends servants with food and new clothes and, go see what Mordecai is doing. And Mordecai sends word back to her and tells her all about this new law and what's going to happen. And she replies to him, I can't just go and talk to the king. He hasn't summoned me in a month. See, I told you get old, you get bored, you've been married a long time, whatever. And he hasn't summoned me in a month, and I am risking my own life. If you go to talk to the king, you don't go to talk to the king. The king talks to you, okay? So you don't come to the king unless you're summoned, even if you're the queen. And if you try to, you can get killed, unless, of course, he raises his scepter to welcome you in and wants to talk to you. But this is scary. So they've been communicating back and forth. Mordecai tells her in chapter 4, starting in verse 12. And they told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this." Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. And so the word is sent back to Esther. He convinces Esther. And I can't imagine having this kind of heart-to-heart conversation with the girl I've raised as my own daughter through messengers, but they managed. And he convinces her, look. And it's very interesting what he says. God is not mentioned, but Mordecai is convinced if you don't deliver the children of Israel, deliverance will arise from another place. So he obviously believes God is in charge. Deliverance will arise from another place, but you may not be saved. So you may think that if you hide and continue not telling anyone that you're a Jew, that you will be saved on this day, and they will kill all the other Jews but you. But you're not necessarily safe. Someone will show up and rescue us, but they may not rescue you because you did not do what you needed to do at the time you needed to do it. And so Esther decides she's going to. Now, Esther makes a plan. Now, I want to point out, not only did Haman consult his gods for a year, but Esther gives the command, gather all the Jews of Susa and hold a fast for 3 days. Fasting and praying. I and my maidservants will do the same thing, and we will fast and pray before I try anything. I think that means, as I sought out commentaries, and not necessarily commentaries, but summaries of the story of Esther to prepare for this, no one pointed out that Haman for a year sought his gods, and Esther sought her God with her people for 3 days. Fasting, not touching food, and then going before the king. Well, she goes before the king. She walks in. The king is happy to see her. She won the beauty contest after all, right? And he raises that scepter to welcome her in. What does my king need? What does my queen need? And she goes, now, ladies, I'm not saying you have to be this way, but if you want your husband to agree with you, this is a good pattern to follow, okay? Just speaking as a husband whose wife is not here. I'd be preaching from over here maybe because she's usually right there. She says, "O king, I have no other desire that you and your top advisor Haman would attend a banquet that I am throwing for you tonight." See, food, ladies, food. That's the point, food. And the king goes, "Granted, that's easy. I can do that. Haman, you can do that? We can do that." Yeah. And Haman goes home to his wife and his other advisors and says, "You guys said this was all going to end horribly." And he recounts all of his many sons and daughters, because that was part of being manly back then, and his riches and his lands and his titles and everything. And on top of all that, I have been invited to a banquet thrown by the queen herself. And I'm the only one besides the king who is allowed to come. What do you think of that? Oh, Haman's going to have a rude awakening. He's already built the Talus Gallows. Think about that. And so they go to this banquet. They eat their fill. They have a good time. Maybe there were musicians. I don't know. There was entertainment. There was just... And the king goes, "All right, woman, I know that you want something. Otherwise, why would you be doing all this? What is it you want? And she goes, O great, wonderful, loving husband, King of kings and Lord of lords of all Persia, I've thrown this banquet in order to invite you to a second banquet tomorrow. And you and Haman both. And so everybody's on cloud nine who's involved. And they say, we can definitely be at another banquet tomorrow. And as you might imagine, they had a wonderful time for the second time. And Haman just thought he was really, really rubbing elbows with the right crowd. And at the end of it, the king goes, all right, enough charades, wife of mine. I know you want something. That's why you're doing all of this. What is it? I'll promise you anything you want. What is it that you want that you've gone to all this trouble? And she says, well, I want you to save my people because there's a decree that's gone out that everybody's going to be allowed to kill him, and he did it. Points at Haman. And the whole story flips. This is the point of conflict in the story. This is the resolution of the conflict. King turns on Haman. You threatened the queen of Persia? And she's like, yeah, I'm a Jew. And you guys signed that thing into law that says that in a few days, everyone can legally kill us and take our stuff. And you were all, and I want my people preserved. And so now there is one law of the Persian Empire that no law that the king signs into law can be reversed. Even the king has to abide by this law. And it keeps your emperors from hastily making decisions and all that kind of stuff. It cannot be reversed. They can't just say, repealed, forget it. The king gives the orders for Haman to be hanged, and the guys basically say, well, he just built the tallest gallows. You want us to use those? Sure. So Haman gets hanged from the tallest gallows, and they come up with, Mordecai is tasked with fixing the problem. So he and some scribes that work there in the palace, they come up with a counter law that is signed by the king that says that on that day, when it is legal to kill Jews and take their stuff, it is also legal for the Jews to defend themselves against anyone who comes against them. And if you kill them, take their stuff. And so this is signed into law. Mordecai is promoted to the top echelons of advising the king. He lives in splendor and grandeur and honor. And that day comes, and guess what? Everyone's afraid of the Jews and no one attacks them. And the dice or the lots that they cast, the Persian word is pur, P-U-R, and the plural form is Purim, and to this day the Jews celebrate a holiday called Purim that was chosen by the casting of lots of when they were supposed to die, but God, through Queen Esther, rescued them. And so today, the message that we have for you is, some of the side points are, be respectful of the kingdom that you live in. Someday we're going home to the kingdom we belong in, but not today. And abide by their rules and laws, but worship only God and do the right thing when it comes down to it. Maybe you're living more in Persia than you are in heaven. Maybe you are someone who has adopted a bit of the local culture of, drunkenness and parties or whatever it is that is so, I just say, and that's the point of the story there, Mordecai and Esther kind of live in this world, and we get the impression they kind of partake of it a little bit. But the Lord is calling you today. The Lord is calling you that even though it feels like it's impossible to live in that kind of nation and not be a part of it, the Lord wants you to come out. The Lord wants you to do the right thing. The Lord wants you to say, no, we don't bow down to anyone else but God. No, we're not going to participate in that. And no, we're not going to just let you destroy God's people. So whatever situation it is that God has in store for you, whatever He's put you in charge of, God has put you there for a reason, not just to promote yourself like Haman, the enemy of Israel, but that you might serve God and serve His people through whatever position you have, as mother, as whatever your position is at work, or whatever business you own, or whoever it is that looks up to you, or your hobby club, or whatever it is. God has given you each and every position you have, not to honor yourself, but to honor God.